awesome to see what God is doing. And again, I want to say thank you for that. Four main ministries are the church, the Christian school, which is K4, Kinder 4 through high school. Then we have the Bible college, which is a 4-year Bible college, which because of COVID is actually available online as well. So we have about 50 in-present students and about 40 students that are online. And so some in El Salvador, some in Honduras, Nicaragua. So it's fun. That opens up a lot of doors as people are preparing for future ministry. And then also we now have a Latin America mission board. Basically, outside of Mexico, there aren't any mission boards for those who are being sent out going into the rest of the world. And so we started one because we believe that's how it's supposed to work, that we should be seeing people saved, baptized, discipled, and then sent out. And so we are now helping 3 missionaries with that. 2 are already in Nicaragua from El Salvador. The other 3rd missionary is from Honduras going to Africa to... would be in English, Papua Guinea? No, it's something like that. Huh? I think it's something like that. It's Papua Guinea is something like that. It's on the west coast of Africa, Spanish-speaking country. I haven't said the name in English in a long time, but something like that. And I think that it's awesome to see this God's plan working everywhere, to see churches from El Salvador, from Honduras, from Nicaragua, from Guatemala, supporting missionaries going out to plant churches in other sides and other places. It's pretty awesome. And so we're excited about what the Lord is doing, and we're excited to get back into it very, very soon. It's hard to know what to say when you come back and you're going to be here for like a half an hour with people who've been praying and supporting, and really the best thing I know to say is thank you. And there's, again, fruit that remains, and we're very, very excited about that. We've been blessed to open up an internship program in the ministries. I say in our church, but it's church, school, Bible college, mission board. So for our Bible college students that are preparing for ministry, we have a internship available. So we have it's a 2-year internship. Sometimes we've had more than others, but right now we've got, I don't know how many actually. There's like, counting the 3rd year, those who stayed on temporary staff as they're finishing Bible college, getting ready to go out. I think it's about 22 or 23 staff members that are these part-time staff members, Bible college students preparing to go out. So that's pretty fun, and we enjoy training them up and getting them ready, and then you just kind of get attached to them, and then they go off. We're hoping a couple of them get married, but we're excited to see how the Lord's working there, and excited to see that go forward. We're in a wide open door. Some missionaries are in very hard countries. I'm not one of them. We're in a politically right now things are great. That's always in flux, but it was considered a very dangerous country. Crime rate was through the roof when we got there, and shortly after we got there in 2011. 2010 through 15, the homicide rate was off the charts. We stayed number 1 in the world for quite a while. Pretty awesome. We are now the most, according to the homicide rate, the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. So that's been a change over the last 2 years. That's a good change. I'm okay with that. But we survived the other 2. So it's just neat. There's no political opposition. There's no issues. There's no hard weather. People are friendly. It's just a nice place. And you say, well, why aren't there more missionaries in El Salvador? I have no idea. Like, if you can survive the Northwest, El Salvador would be amazing. Go soul winning, and imagine going soul winning, talking to hundreds of people, and not having one person turn down a tract. I've probably had, in 12 years, and handing out many thousands of tracts, I've probably had a couple dozen people refuse the tract kind of politely. And then you come to Northwest, and I'm like, wow, these are real Christians up here that go soul winning. This is some people are just not real interested. And we're excited about the potential And I think most of us who've been saved for any amount of time realize these things kind of come and go. So when there's an open door, you got to go through it. Political situations change, environments change, the economy is improving, which is nice. But generally with that, when you have a booming economy, you have less interest in God. When you have safety, you have less interest in God. So both of those things are working in our favor as far as we have a better economy and better security. But with that, it oftentimes means there's less interest in the things of God. And so we want to take advantage of the opportunities we have, and we're blessed to be serving in El Salvador. I ask you would pray specifically for the Spiritual Leadership Conference Latin America that we're hosting in about 6 weeks there in El Salvador. We've got 11 countries represented, signed up, people coming to that conference to be encouraged in the word of the Lord. And so we praying for that conference. We're expecting several hundred pastors and laymen in the churches. It's for men and women, and we're expecting them to come. We're going to take about 3 days and just try to invest in their lives. Many churches are involved in helping and preparing for that. And we get to help coordinate some logistics and host that. We're hosting it off-site because we don't have enough room on property for that, but I think it's going to be a blessing. So that's right after Thanksgiving, 27th, 28th, and 29th of November. So I appreciate you praying for that. Let's go in our Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter 18. 2 Samuel 18. I am fairly confident you have not heard a missions message from this passage before. So tonight we're going to. There's a lot of things I'd like to mention. We're going to kind of give the context quickly of where we are in this passage, and then see just a few key things from these verses in 2 Samuel 18, verses 19 through 23. Just want to mention quickly as I'm starting, English is my first language. I also rarely preach in English, only when I'm back in the States, which it's been a while since I've been here. That's kind of how it works. So if I randomly throw out unknown words, again, it's a known language, it's Spanish. Are there any Spanish speakers in here? Back me up. Thank you. All right. So you guys get my back if I stumble on my English and switch over to Spanish. As long as we have interpreters, we're still biblical. But just wanted to mention that. I get nervous preaching in English. I don't know why. I grew up speaking only English and and then I go to El Salvador, and that's about how I speak Spanish as well, like a gringo. So I'm somewhere in the middle, but we're going to try to stick with English as much as we can. That being said, I don't even know how to pronounce these names correctly, but we're going to give it a try. Quick overview of where we are in 2 Samuel chapter 18, in case you don't have the entire Bible memorized. David had a series of bad choices in his life. He had at least 8 wives that caused some conflict. He had some problems there with his children. He did not seem to be very involved in their lives. And his leadership style with the country was working well. His leadership style in his home did not seem to be working well with him. And so with his children, some of the problems he had with one of his sons, lusted after his half-sister, one of David's daughters, and then he violated her, and then her brother killed the other half-brother, and then he fled, and then he comes back, Absalom. And so he comes back, and David doesn't want to talk to him. David still has some resentment there, and he's not dealing with the problem. So Absalom waits outside of where people would go in to meet with the king, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you here?" "Oh, the king's really busy, doesn't have time for you." "I, on the other hand, have lots of time. I'll be happy to help you with whatever you have." He was a person who was well-spoken and very kind and compassionate, and the Bible describes him as being a very handsome person. And for whatever reason, he had very long hair, and he would cut it once a year. Not my style, but that was his thing. And so Absalom wins the heart of a good part of the kingdom. And then one day he decides he's going to be the king, and so he comes in to be the king, and the country's not real sure who to follow, Absalom, who they really like, or David, who's old and he's kind of standoffish at the moment, and they're not sure who to follow. And in that kind of indecision, Absalom takes the throne, takes the palace. David takes off. And, there are some faithful ones who go with David. And so they're off, and now they have a kind of divided kingdom and unsure how things are going to go. Absalom comes after David eventually with the army, and they're going to take out the former king, King David. In this battle, David stays out of the battle, and Joab goes out to lead the battle, as he's done many times. And Absalom gets his hair caught in a tree branch. Really weird. Again, I'm fairly safe. I don't think I'm going to have any trouble, Pastor. I think you're okay as well. I just don't think I'm going to have an issue with that. But a couple of guys have really close haircuts as well. I think you're going to be good. But this is what happened. He got his hair stuck in a branch, and he's hanging there. His animal goes out from under him, and Joab finds him, kills him. And so now they have to give the news. They've blown the trumpet. The battle has stopped, and because Absalom's dead, so there's no issue now. But this is also the king's son. So this is a victory, but it's also, David said, hey, be careful with Absalom. You know, the guy who's trying to kill everybody. And so there's this conflict of interest. And so we jump into this story. Absalom's dead, and now we have to let the king know. One, we won the battle, and two, Absalom's dead, which is great news unless the king told you don't kill Absalom. So this is where we're at, jumping into verse 19. Then said Ahimaaz, I don't know how to say his name correctly, the son of Zadok, let me now run and bear the king's tidings, how that the Lord hath avenged him of his enemies. Now I just want to mention briefly who this guy is. This is not a military guy. Ahimaaz, if you were to have a Bible trivia, okay, who's Ahimaaz and what did he do? I'm pretty sure we would all be looking like, I have no idea, right? Okay, I'm not seeing any volunteers here. This is one thing he did. Before this, he also was very instrumental in helping to save King David. Briefly before this, in the same period where Absalom is taken over, Ahimaaz is the son of Zadok, who's the priest in the temple. And so Ahimaaz and Jonathan are going to be the ones to take the message from the capital to David of what Absalom is planning to do. And so in this, somebody sees them, they hide in a well, and they throw the blanket over the well, and they're kind of working there. After the person leaves, they get out and they keep running, and they deliver this message. This is the same guy. I don't know exactly why he's here, because the priest, and he was working in the temple, the priests don't go out into battle. But there he is. And you see him out there, and he comes up to Joab, and he says this key phrase, and this is the title of the message, let me run. Let me run. So first of all, if you're taking notes, we see Ahimaaz was a volunteer. No one came to him. No one came to him. I think a lot of times as Christians, we're guilty of just waiting for orders. And we say, I'm willing to do whatever. If somebody wants my help, just let me know. But we kind of have marching orders. Jesus said something like, go ye therefore into all the world. Preach the gospel to every creature. We're to go, we're to make disciples and to see them saved and baptized and to teach them all the things that he's taught us. This is the Great Commission. And yet we're waiting for marching orders, like somebody has to tell us to do something with that. God's looking for volunteers. I've heard people say, I would go to the mission field if God would just call me. And I'm like, have you read Matthew or Mark or Luke or John? Like any of the Gospels, Acts? God has called us. He's called us to take this gospel into the whole world. I think some people are waiting for some kind of a miraculous experience, or the clouds to move, or some kind of deja vu or something to help them realize, well, this is God's call on my life. And you're probably going to keep living in grandma's basement while you're waiting for that. Looking for volunteers. We're not, there's probably somebody I just offended right now, sorry. Kind of. But God's looking for people that just say, hey, I know what needs done. I've got the gospel message. I'm ready to go. I think Christians in general, we are good about following orders to a degree. But I think generally speaking, and I've been around a little bit. I've been to 49 states. I've been to several countries. This year I went to the Philippines for a conference there, and I flew from El Salvador to Washington, D.C., and went east, flew across the oceans going east, had a layover in Abu Dhabi, and then into the Philippines. So that whole trip was east. And then when I left the Philippines, I went east again. Then went to China, and then went to San Francisco, and then went to El Salvador. That was all east as well. So that would be like all the way around the world in one trip. Super cool. Lots of cultures, lots of churches in that conference in the Philippines. Literally thousands of people were there in that conference. There was 44 countries represented. It was awesome. And I get the Christian culture a little bit. And a lot of times we are very guilty of just kind of waiting. We don't know exactly for what, but we're just going to kind of wait. And we're going to kind of, if somebody asks us to do something, why sure, we'd be happy to help. But if nobody asks, we're like, well, nobody asked. Like, somebody has to ask us to pick up trash off the floor. If you see trash on the floor in God's house or on God's property, this would be something that we should all take care of. Nobody has to ask you to do that. If you see somebody who needs help, help them. If you see somebody who's going to hell, help them. This is pretty basic. You guys with me? I'm getting some really blank stares. Okay, but I think you're with me. I think you're hearing me. And when we, as Christians, we're very tempted to just kind of wait. And we're tempted to just kind of get in our routine, and we get up, we go to work, we come back from work, we've tried to recover from the day at work so we can go do the same thing again tomorrow. And we kind of forget why we're here. We exist to represent and glorify God. That's why we're here. God really doesn't care what career we have as long as we serve Him in it. God really doesn't care if you get that promotion unless you're going to be using that for Him. Sometimes we get so focused on very temporal things, we don't get it. We don't do what God wants us to do because it's like, well, nobody told me. I didn't know I was supposed to be a missionary. I didn't know I was supposed to go win people to the Lord. I didn't know that somebody needed my help. God has given us an amazing ability to observe and to be involved. Ahimaaz wasn't asked to help. He said, hey, somebody needs to go tell the king. It's curious. He's a priest. How does he know military protocol and how this is supposed to work out? But he says, we've won. We've blown the trumpet. I'm fast. I can use what I have. I'm ready to go. And the answer he got actually was no. Really unusual. Pastor, I doubt that happens very often in the church. Somebody says, hey, Pastor, I just love to be a blessing today. Can I just give extra or clean the church or just fix something? And Pastor's going to say, no, really don't want you to do that right now. No, not going to happen. But that was the answer that Ahimaaz got. In verse 20, and Joab said unto him, thou shalt not bear tidings this day, but thou shalt bear tidings another day. But this day thou shalt bear no tidings, because the king's son is dead. Really? And then verse 21 is like a slap in the face. And then said Joab the Cushi. Now Joab is the general. He's the most authoritative person after David, and David is not involved in this. And then so Joab said to Cushi, go tell the king what thou hast seen. And Cushi bowed himself unto Joab and ran. Wow. So Ahimaaz says, hey, there's a need. I'm willing. I want to go. And Joab says, no, not today. Somebody else can go today. Hey, you, go tell the king. And this guy made reverence. He bowed to him, and he obeyed. That's basically describing most Christians. We're willing to do what we're told to do if it's direct and simple. But a lot of times we're not willing to do what God has already left us to do if it's going to require some commitment or hard times. This is, whatever. We just kind of back off on things that could be uncomfortable for serving the Lord. But most Christians would be more like Cushi. It's an interesting name. But he just, okay, you say, go, I'm going to go. Yes, sir. And he took off. That's a great answer. But God has already given us a great commission to do. We don't need more marching orders. We just need to step up and obey him wherever we are in the world. But we see that Ahimaaz, he was not discouraged when somebody else was called. I think sometimes we get into this kind of comparative mindset even with other churches, which is incredible. But we have this, they have more people in their choir, or they have less people in their choir, and there's like the competition between people who are trying to work for God's kingdom. And I'm so blessed to know a lot of the churches up here in the Northwest, not all of them, but a lot of the Baptist churches Northwest, I know them, and there's just a good spirit of, hey, we just want to see people saved, and there's a lot of people to reach with the gospel. I was up in Seattle. There is apparently some work to be done still. There's a lot of crazy people up here. Then I was in Kent, Washington, and like everybody I talked to was talking about how many times their car's been stolen. It's a competition. And I go to the parts store, replacing parts for the pastor's car that had been stolen again. And the guy's like, oh yeah, basically we can't keep this stuff in stock. That's the stuff we most sell. We sell more key cylinders than we do car batteries. I'm like, wow, welcome to the USA. I'm going to go back to El Salvador where it's safe. And, so yes, I've been putting the club on the steering wheel on our truck, which was also stolen several years ago. And you think, man, this is crazy. There's a lot of need. So I told the pastor, I said, Pastor, you've been here for 6 years. Like, really? There's still unsafe people in your city. What have you guys been doing? And I think Vancouver is probably kind of like that. There's still some unsafe people here. I passed 3 of them just up at the corner here, but I wasn't sure about the rest of the city. There's a lot of people that need to be reached with the gospel. And sometimes we get this mindset that we're in competition with somebody else. Don't worry about anybody else. Just focus on what God has given you to do and do it really well. God has a plan for each person. Ahimaaz, he didn't feel like he was in competition. He saw the opportunity and he said, I want to go. I want to be part of what's going on here. I want to help things move forward. And I really like that he did not take no for an answer. He insisted on doing what he could do. Verse 22. This is the next verse. So right after Cushi bows himself to Joab and runs in obedience, verse 22, then said Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, yet again to Joab, but howsoever, let me, I pray thee, also run after Cushi. And Joab said, wherefore wilt thou run, my son, seeing thou hast no tidings ready? But verse 23, he says it again. But howsoever, said he, let me run. That's the third time he said that. And he said unto him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran Cushi. He got there first. Pretty cool. So Cushi took the time to say, okay, yes, sir. He bowed himself to Joab, and he takes off as a good soldier. Ahimaaz, we don't see anywhere that he bows to Joab. Joab said, run. Boom! Just see a cloud of dust behind him. And he beats the other guy. This guy had a head start. They had another conversation. I don't know if you've ever run, but if you get a minute behind the other guy, that's a long way. And this guy goes a different route, gets there faster. Pretty cool. Why did he do better? I think he did better because his heart was in it. He was dedicated to it because this was personal. He wanted to do his best because it wasn't for King David. He wanted to do his best because it was for King Jehovah. And when we serve the Lord like that, we can see some great results. Because really it doesn't matter who's watching us. It doesn't matter if somebody has asked us or told us what to do. God has given us instructions to do, and He's the one we're serving. So we don't need to be worried about what happens around here. We don't need to be concerned about what will that person think or this other person think. God has given us something to do, and we need to work with what we have. He did His best, and He did His job better because His heart was in it. He was doing it directly for God. Now, as we serve the Lord, it could be in Washington, Oregon, or around the world. It really doesn't change. We need to be serving with passion. There are different things that people are passionate about. And it's fun to watch how people respond to what they're passionate about. I'm a man of many interests. I like lots of things. One of the things I like are big, strong motors, fast vehicles. Who's kind of like that? They like things that can go and go fast, okay? I think it's necessary. Like, sure, the truck that we pull the trailer with, today we were doing some exploring up in the mountains, and I have no idea which mountains, but there's a lot of them around here, but we were doing some exploring and pulling onto the road. We didn't have the trailer on at that moment. And so I punched it, and that turbo kicked in, and we peel it out. It was awesome. I was like, wow, this thing's great. And the boys are all looking at me like, why are we pulling out so fast? Just because the gravel was loose and we can. You know, we got to test the equipment. I like fast things. I like big motors. I like things that work well. I had a truck in high school and in college that it was a 96 Chevy 1500 work truck. Very basic, 4x2, automatic, single cab, 8-foot bed, had no extras. It had an aftermarket stereo and one speaker that somebody had installed. I mean, it was extremely basic, no carpet. I mean, we're talking the most basic model possible. I loved that truck, but I loved that truck because when I got it, you couldn't even tell what color it was. It was just completely covered with tar. And somebody used it for like a mail route or something and just ran over, I don't know, these roads are closed for most people, but they're just running over this new tar, and the truck was black. And you could see little specks of red behind it. So every day I'd wash that thing down with kerosene, and on the way home from work, wash it with kerosene, and then wash it with water, soap and water. And I did that for 2 months. And that thing looked awesome when I was done. Tried to sell it, nobody wanted to buy it. And so then I went back and got it to take to college. And driving it from Ohio to California in Flagstaff, Arizona. I got water in my fuel tank, filled up the fuel, made it 2 miles down the road, the truck died. And got towed into town, and I said, well, you know, I don't have any cash on me to pay the tow truck. I said, well, who's got an ATM, you know? He's like, well, hey, there's a parts store here, and there's a, whatever, Sam's Club or Costco or whatever it was. And he's like, they've got an ATM. So he takes me there to the parking lot. While I'm going to the ATM, pull out my last 5 cents to pay for the tow truck. He leaves the truck in the parking lot. Well, I didn't pay attention where he left it, but it was like far in, low spot of the parking lot. No problem. So I got to pull the fuel tank. So I'm down there, and I had my tools in my truck, and I'm pulling off the fuel tank, and it pours rain. Flagstaff is like crazy weather, but it's 50 degrees, pouring rain, and I'm out there all night long pulling out this thing. I'm laying in about that much water. It was awesome. I have no money for a hotel. I have no money for repairs. And so I take this, there's a Napa or something right there. I don't remember what parts store. But I went, I got a new fuel pump. I put it in. I said, all right, we're good. I had just enough money to cover the fuel pump, like $450. And I thought, man, I hope this gets me here. I don't have enough money to drive from Flagstaff to California, but at least my fuel pump will work. And so, you know, I get it in, I get it installed, I get a couple gallons of gas in there, it won't run. And I do some tests, and the fuel pump's not working. It's a brand new fuel pump. And so I walk over to the store and said, hey, this thing's not working. They're like, well, bring it in, we'll replace it. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, just bring it in, replace it. Okay, take a fuel tank back out, take the pump back over, and then he said, okay, well, it's actually a different model that we're going to give you. It's whatever, but we're going to swap it, but you have to repay for it, but we're just going to refund this one and that one. I did not know that the refund takes 3 days to go back in. And so I didn't have money to cover both transactions. And so they, you know, for me, I'm putting one, getting another, I'm good to go. But it overcharged my account $450. Super cool. Well, I still had, you know, a few dollars in there, so I came back for a couple tools, and I swiped that card several times. Because according to my calculations, I was okay. But I wasn't. And so I had all these overcharged, and so then I locked my card, and so I was stuck. That fuel pump also did not work. And so I don't know, I think I left on Monday or Tuesday, I just drive in, and it was just a crazy time. And so Sunday, I'm trying to call for church, trying to get a ride to church. Well, nobody would come pick me up. I didn't have a ride. I didn't have money for a cab, and I looked like a hobo. I mean, I've been sleeping in my truck for 3 days, and I've got everything that runs off the parking lot. I was laying in that for a while, and just sleeping in my pickup truck with like a big knife on my lap and just covered up. And like, all right. Life is good. Got to get back to Bible college, and my job that I'm about to get fired from because I didn't show up for work, and so I was like, man, this is a weird experience. Somebody came over to pick me up, and there was a problem with the rental trailer, and he said, well, we got to leave the truck. We'll just take you. So he took me back to California, and then I borrowed somebody else's truck and came back and got a rental trailer, and then my truck fell off the rental trailer. It was just a great trip. It was awesome, and I was $2,000 in debt from all the overcharged drafts. I mean, it was a great experience. And so I get all this and finally get the truck worked. I had to replace the fuel pump 5 times, and the 5th one was a charm. And so finally got the truck working, and then had that thing just decked out, ready to go. And somebody says, hey, it's Pumpkin Day and the bus ministry. We want to use this truck to be a blessing for the Lord's service, and can we use your truck to follow the bus and give the kids a pumpkin? I said, don't use my truck. You're going to wreck my truck. You're not even a good driver. He's like, I'll take good care of it. I promise nothing will happen to your truck. I was like, dude, I just got this thing fixed. And so I used my truck. And sure enough, the driver of the bus picked the wrong street. So he realized he's in the wrong street, pops the bus in reverse, and just plows into my truck, which was following the bus. He hit it hard enough that the hooks on the back of under the bumper on the bus went through the bumper on my truck. It was a pretty good hit. So it was flat all the way to the front wheels. Great. So he's like, hey, great news, we delivered the pumpkins. Bad news is your truck got a little smashed on the front. I'm like, how little? He's like, we were able to get the fenders off of the wheels so I can still drive. I was like, oh man. Well, I was like, now what am I going to do? And so a friend of mine said, hey, I'll help you fix it. We took the insurance money. It's like a $2,000 truck. Insurance gave me $3,500 to fix it. I'm like, you guys do not know how to do math. This is great. So I fixed the truck myself, made money, paid my school bill, and I was like, this is awesome. Somebody else wrecked my truck, and with those repairs, I redid the exhaust and redid the transmission. I said, man, this thing is sweet. And then I sold it because I wanted to get married. But I loved that truck. You know why I loved that truck? Because my money was there. My time was there. Quite a bit of blood as well. But I had invested in that, and that was a very temporal thing. When we think about what we invest our lives into, we should probably pick something that will last. Anybody who's ever purchased a new thing has realized how quickly those things wear out. Anyone remember their first smartphone? Who remember getting your first smartphone? Anyone remember when your first smartphone died? It's like, no! Now what? Now people are like, oh, just go get another one. And it used to be like a thing when you had to buy a new phone. It was like a difficult challenge to, go out and purchase one of these things. And you think, well, my life is set. I've got a smartphone. It doesn't even have buttons on it. Like a whole screen moves. Some of you remember that, right? Don't look at me like that. I'm not that old. Phones are fairly new around here. And then you realize this is no good. The iPhone 3, I had to save up, and I bought one in pieces, and I put it together myself, and that was my first iPhone. And I was like, man, this thing's awesome. Do you know how much an iPhone 3G is worth right now? Like, if you could get it turned on, I think you could probably get a collector to pay like $5. People were killing other people for those signs. People would stand in line all night long and be the first one to get this phone, had a selfie camera and everything. Amazing. You could like zoom in on a picture. All this stuff is really basic now. And people would walk away from the Apple store and they get mugged 2 blocks away. And people were like, I'm not going to wait in line. I'm just going to show up and get somebody the next morning. And you think, this is so crazy. And that was so important to so many people. And now where is that? But that person that you saw saved last year, he's still on his way to heaven. Oh man, those stories are just, they never get old. And to see people get saved, to see people get baptized, and to see people get discipled, that is eternal. And we need to make sure what we're investing in is eternal. On Sunday, what's today? Wednesday. Sunday night, Alex was preaching. We've got 8 guys who are preaching in our church right now, rotating through. Alex was preaching. He is, how old is Alex? 21, 22? 21. he came to our school, he came in 8th grade. By the middle of that year, nobody wanted to be his teacher. Specifically, they didn't want him to be their student. He was just difficult. He would fall asleep in every class. Like, he got like a 5-hour nap every day, all the way through school. He was still complaining about being tired. He was disinterested in life. He had he wasn't like totally disrespectful, but there was zero interest. So you talk to him, no response. You ask him a question, no response. You ask him to do his homework, no response. And then you finally get his attention, and what he would answer would be totally useless information. And you're like, how are you still alive? Like, there needs to be some level of like oomph to be able to survive in life. And so we have 5 people on the administrative staff in the school. I'm the administrator, and I have like a double vote on who gets to stay and go. And I don't have all the votes. I have a double vote. And so we would vote sometimes when we have some difficult situations, kids that don't want to straighten up, and then we say, okay, well, let's make room for other kids, because we were always maxed out. We had a lot of more interest of kids coming in than room for them. We have about 300 students. And so in this meeting, everybody in that meeting said, okay, Alex needs to go, like now. And I said, no, he's staying. They're like, okay, your vote doesn't weigh more than everybody's. You have a double vote. So that's 4 on 2. So no. And I said, okay, he's staying. So he stays, and everyone's looking at me like, all right, so you better do something with him. I'm like, all right, I'll take him. He's my project. And then I was like, what was I thinking? This guy is difficult. And so I started trying to help him and disciple, and he got saved. That helps. And then he started following the Lord, and the Lord called him he surrendered his life to serve the Lord, and then his life just changed around. And he was preaching our church last Sunday night. And you think, wow, that's neat. And there's a whole bunch more people like that just waiting. And there's some people you say, there is no hope for that person. Aren't you glad God didn't say that about you? Boy, am I glad he didn't say that about me. Of all the things that are so wonderful about God, I'm very thankful for his grace, his undeserved favor. And as we think of all of the things that God has offered to us, we think, man, I don't know what I could do. What we can do, each one of us, is we can do what God has told us to do. Take the gospel to every creature. There's plenty of people around. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We should all be faithful in taking the gospel here, next door, into the uttermost parts of the earth. And we do the uttermost parts of the earth through missions. Wherever we are is where we should be serving the Lord. People who are serving the Lord in other places, that's where they are. We should be involved in that. This is a really cool thing. This church has been supporting us since we were on deputation. Once we got to El Salvador, started the church there. A few months later, we had our first missions conference. The church was started before we got there. There was about 13 people there when we got there. There was a missionary there for a year, and he was gone for a year before we got there. So 3 months after we got there, we had our first missions conference and took on our first missionary. We just 2 weeks ago had our 12th missions conference, I guess, and just took on, we raised our support, and we're planning on taking on more missionaries. And we're currently supporting 13 missionaries, have more in the budget. And you say, well, why? Well, that works everywhere. God's plan works everywhere. It's not only the responsibility of the churches in the States to send out missionaries to the rest of the world. That's the responsibility of every church in the whole world. And so this is really cool. This church is supporting us very faithfully. And then the church where we are serving is supporting a whole lot more missionaries than just what we are receiving. And so that's multiplying. Those missionaries that we're supporting are also supporting missionaries. I don't know exactly what the number is, but we're probably talking around 25 different missionaries that are receiving the benefit of the support that you guys are sending to us. That's pretty cool. That only works in God's economy. If you get a business that'll multiply by 25, that's awesome. We can do that with souls. That's really awesome. It's just so cool to see how God works. And he uses completely normal people. There are some things when you would get to Cojutepeque, which is the name of the city where we live, and you'd see the work there, you'd say, what's going on here? This is amazing. It was a huge property. It's an old property. It was mostly developed. We've been remodeling and fixing. But it's huge. It's a huge jump start. And so we have this property, and it's full every day of people. Hundreds of people just come through there. And you look around and you say, well, what's going on here? Like, why? And so that if you knew me, that question would be much bigger. What? How is this guy pastoring that church? How is he administrating that school and that Bible college? And you say, what's going on here? And really, this is what God does. He uses people who are not capable so he can do something awesome. And you say, well, that has nothing to do with the missionary. That's just God. Exactly. That's the point. When I was in high school, 16 years old, in our missions conference in our church in Ohio, where I grew up, I felt the Lord call me to be a missionary to Spanish-speaking people. I assumed that was Mexico. I learned that there are other countries that speak Spanish, but at the time, I was thinking Mexico. I had no idea El Salvador existed. I probably did not pay attention to geography class. But, for those of you who were like that, it's a small country in Central America, okay? And so I was planning to be a missionary. Well, I talked to my pastor about that, and he said, hey, if the Lord wants you to do that, that's great. We'll pray about it, and let me know in a few weeks if you still feel that same passion. Then I did. And then I was talking to my parents about it, and my mom was really hesitant. And not because she didn't want me to be a missionary. She wasn't sure I was able to be a missionary. I'll tell you why. When I was 13, I had a grand mal seizure. Lasted about 5 minutes, and it kind of scrambled my brain. It crossed my wires, and I was extremely fatigued. I could not do really anything. My speech was confused, and so I would speak, and I would confuse the order of the words. It didn't make any sense. And so my mom would look at me and say, what'd you say? And I'd say, I don't know. I forget. I would forget from just those 30 seconds. I had no idea what I was saying. And then she would ask me, no, seriously, what did you say? And I'd say, what did I say about what? I forgot, where this conversation even started. And it was very frustrating for me. I was 13. I was very conscious of what was happening. But at the same time, I was not able to kind of break out of that shell. And so with time, that kind of got a little better, but it was very hard to speak. I had to go back several years of my schooling. Very frustrating. 16, I had another one. That same year is when the Lord's calling me to be a missionary, and I'm still kind of recovering on that speech side of things. I was working construction. I was working on roofs. And for a while, I wasn't allowed to drive. That was not cool. I bought my own car. I have a twin brother. He didn't buy his own car. But when I had a seizure, my parents were worried I'd have one driving, and so he's my chauffeur. Frustrating things in life. There's very few things more frustrating than having your twin be your designated driver when it's your car, And of course, I'm a better driver than he is, and you know how all these things go. And so just a frustrating time. And so my mom says, Adam, I don't know if you can learn another language. You don't even speak English. I said, well, fair enough. But, if I go to Spanish-speaking people, I don't have to speak English. She's like, I don't think you get it. You have to learn languages. And I was like, well, it'll be okay. I had another seizure at 18, another one at maybe 20, and then every time, actually a little less in intensity, less, kind of damage that took place, and just kind of, what's going on? And so, pretty much gave up on English and switched over to Spanish, and it was very hard to memorize things, very hard to just do normal life stuff. And you think, why would God ask me to go learn another language if this is not a good thing for me? I'm not the linguistics guy. I could barely get by in my own language. I literally repeated all of my English classes and all of my Spanish classes at Bible college. I was giving my teachers another chance. I felt like they didn't do a great job teaching that the first time through. And, so I did 4 years of Bible college and 5. And you just look and you say, really? Some of you may know Dr. Rasmussen. He's the vice president there at West Coast Baptist College where I studied. After one of my classes, he gave me my test scores back, looking at them as he gives them to me, and he says, Adam, scholastics just isn't your thing. And I said, scholastics? He's like, things related to schooling. I was like, no, not my thing. He's like, all right, can you change the motor mounts on my car? Now we're talking. Okay, I can do that. And so now I'm in charge of a Christian school and a Bible college, and you're thinking, really? Why? Because nobody checks to see what my grade point average was when I was in college. But you say, why would God do that? I think the reason God does that is because he wants to use people who aren't like super qualified. That way all the glory goes to him. That's how this is supposed to work. And so it does. And so I'm just a very ordinary guy serving an extraordinary God. And the results are marvelous. And it works for everybody. I think as we travel around, we run into this question. Why is God calling less people into full-time ministry? The population of the world is higher than it's ever been. The need is higher than it's ever been. The amount of churches that are permanently closing their doors and not being replaced is stunning in the U.S. and around the world. And you say, well, what's the deal? Why are there less people being called? I don't think God is calling less people. I think less people are answering the call. And to a degree, we all have to answer. If God is calling you to serve him, you can't just not answer. If you don't obey, that would be a no. If you do obey, that's a yes. So he's not calling less people. And it's not necessarily less people responding. It's less people responding, yes. Here am I, send me. So as we look around the world, it doesn't matter where you go. There are needs. It could be, across town, right here in the same city. It could be another state, another country. Spin the globe, put your finger there. There's a need, a huge need. There's a financial, a spiritual need everywhere in the world. But it's just waiting for people to go. And you say, well, who's going to be that person? Paul and Silas, they were serving. Paul and Barnabas, they were serving. Barnabas, what I meant to say. And they were sent out as leaders in the church. Now they're sending out their best. And they go starting churches. It's what we've done. Lord called Walter. He said, hey, God wants me to be a missionary to Nicaragua. And I said, man, I'm going to really miss you. He and I just worked so good together. And he did so much. I thought, well, I can't be in God's will, in the way of God's will. Have a blast. We'll help you. And we were over there about 5 mission trips over to help them get the church started. We've sent groups over this year to help them as they're growing in their church and to say, hey, I want to be part of what the Lord's doing there. But God just calls normal people. He doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. So I think tonight, midweek service, we're all a little tired. We're all kind of thinking about other things coming into the service. I hope not during the service. But during this service, I think every one of us should evaluate, am I doing everything I can to serve the Lord? Does he want me to serve him in a different or in a more significant way? Am I in the center of God's will where I am right now? I don't know basically anybody here. I don't know your story. I don't know where you work. I don't know who's working. And it really doesn't matter. I do know that God is calling laborers. And I do know that these missionaries and church planners are really just church members sent out of a local church that God moves to a different place. And it's wonderful to see what happens. Pastor, how long have you been here?
25 as a pastor.
25 years as a pastor. That's a long time. And I don't know a number. It would be very hard to calculate how many people in this area have been impacted by the faithfulness of one family. And then it's exponential. God's calling more of those. God's calling people into his service. So the question tonight is really very easy. What are we going to do about that? Are you willing to give, go, serve? Are you willing to be part of God's plan to reach the whole world with the gospel? It's a yes or no answer. We go into this, God says, hey, all in. This guy, Ahimaaz, he says, hey, I don't have everything to offer. I'm not a great warrior. I'm a good runner. I want to serve the Lord with what I have. God has given you what you need to serve him the way he wants you to serve him. The real question is, are you willing? We're going to have heads bowed and eyes closed this evening. I don't know what you normally do to finish out the Wednesday evening service, But I'm going to ask a few questions, and Pastor will come in a minute to finish up the prayer time here, the invitation. But I want to ask, between you and God, are you willing? I don't know what's going on in your heart. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know if God has used tonight's message or maybe many messages over the last several months to work on your heart. But if God is touching your heart with that desire, hey, I want you to do something different. I want you to do something more. I want you to be willing to serve full time. Would you be willing to just surrender and let Him lead you? With heads bowed and eyes closed, nobody looking around, just myself and Pastor have our eyes open. You know, and say that, tonight, maybe accumulation before tonight, coming into tonight, I feel like the Lord would like for me to serve Him in full-time service. I'm not currently doing that, but I feel like the Lord would like for me to surrender to serve Him in full-time service. Is there anyone like that? Raise your hand. Nobody's looking around, just myself and Pastor. I feel like I'm willing to serve the Lord, and I want to surrender my life to do what He wants done. Anybody like that? Raise your hand. Got a few hands. God knows who you are. And God knows what He wants to do with you. The only question is, are you willing to just let Him guide you? Pastor, why don't you come and lead the invitation this evening?